Welcome. So just in terms of updates, I just want to give a shout out to Lauren Rhines, who I know the board has worked a lot with over the last couple of years, and as well as a lot of staff members and members of the public. Lauren is unfortunately going to be leaving service with the town of Madison and taking on a new position with another town, which is a great step up for her in her career, and we're excited for her. And so I just wanted to give a shout out and congratulations to Lauren. She'll be with us until December 16th. And then moving on to her new position with another town that is 5 minutes from her house rather than an hour commute. So I know that'll be a life changer, especially when you have young kids. So congratulations to Lauren. Any other board member comments or liaison reports?
I would like to echo and expand, Peggy, on your comments with Lauren. I remember when I first started in the Board of Selectmen, Lauren was and continued on to be an incredible resource. She was always a person who would pick up the phone and answer some of the technical and process questions, right? The minutia of how we conduct our business. She was always helpful, always pointing us to the right staff person when we had a question. You know, our loss is Newington's gain. She will be missed. I think that every day it's good to be reminded that we're blessed with effectively a superstar cast of town staff, employees, and certainly when you think about the dedication and service that is embodied in our staff on the whole, Lauren really does stand out as one of those examples.
I would like to add my well wishes. I think the thing that I will remember most about Lauren is her job required juggling so many different responsibilities, and yet I always found her to be very calm and very measured and providing great reassurance that everything was being well taken care of, even probably while she was scrambling to make that happen.
And I would just like to add my thanks. I've actually worked with her the least of all of us. I think she came in under Fillmore from McPherson's administration, and I just always felt she was sort of the glue that kept everything running, and was so helpful as an assistant. So she would miss, but I think all the points made were well taken. It'd be nice for her not to have to travel so far from her kids. And Lauren, we wish you all the best. Newington is very fortunate. Thank you.
All right, the final pile on, might as well here. Lauren, you know how I feel about you. I can see you on actually right now. We should have probably promoted you and had you come and feel the love in the room, but you've been our rock, you've been our guide, you've been our source of truth to many of these issues and things that we wrestle with. I am thrilled that you have an opportunity now to be close to your family, a quick commute so you can get home and be at a baseball game or a piano lesson or whatever you're doing. That's wonderful to hopefully gain a little bit of your life back as well. So we wish you well. Please stay in touch. I know you will. And you've been a great friend along the way. Take care, Lauren.
Okay, great. Well, and there'll be an opportunity I'm sure you'll all get an opportunity to say your farewells in person also. So information will come out about that, kind of leaving get together. With that, any other board and commission updates? Or I know we just met, I think it was last week, right? On Tuesday. So I don't know if there's any other updates. So with that, then I'll move on to citizens' comments. Jacqueline, do we have any citizens' comments? Raise your hand if you'd like to make a public comment.
Not seeing any hands raised.
Okay. All right, there's an opportunity also at the end of the meeting on the agenda for public comment. So moving on, we'll go on to the business part of the agenda. And item number 5 is, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Maureen seconded. Okay, great. Any questions or concerns? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. The ayes have it. So moving on to item number 6, and Jacqueline, if you could please move up Ira Bloom, our land use attorney, who's joining us for this, but I will read the item. Discuss and take possible action regarding a stipulation for judgment regarding property located at 289 Old Toll Road in case entitled SXS Solutions LLC versus Michael D. Riccuti et al. Docket number NNH 21-6199660, Superior Court Judicial District of New Haven, a copy of which is on file at Madison Town Hall in the First Selectman's office. I get a second? Okay.
Second.
All right. So with that, this is a case that we had talked about several months ago. And I'll let Ira just give a brief overview, but I think the resolution is comparable to what the board had generally kind of discussed at a previous meeting. So Ira, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. You can hear me okay now? Everything?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Good morning, members of the board. Ira Bloom. I'll just join the parade of comments about Lauren. I've worked with her also for many years, most recently on the charter, and she's been just terrific for the town. So I wish you well, Lauren. You have before you the final stipulation here in this case. We talked about it in executive session some weeks ago. It's called SXS Solutions versus Riccuti. And then just quickly, this really relates to a real estate transaction that occurred back in 2020. Dispute primarily between the seller and the buyer regarding property at 289 Old Toll Road. The suit was brought because the seller, there was an allegation that the seller, the owner, prior owner, misrepresented the legal status of the house, and there were representations that it was a legal 3-family dwelling. In fact, based on the town records, that was not the case. So that suit started, and at a point in time in 2021, the Riccutis filed a third-party action against the town, specifically against the CEO, John DeLora, and against the town. And that allegation was basically that the town was stopped from enforcing any zoning regulations. Basically, the claim was that through a series of actions and records, the town could not enforce its zoning regulations, couldn't insist that that it be a single family home, et cetera. The allegation really, in my judgment, had little merit, but what was clear was that this was going to go on for some time. It was going to result in litigation. It was going to result in legal fees. And the fact remains that the house did exist as a 3-family structure for decades. We could trace it back perhaps to the 1960s. So it was sitting there and was in fact operating as a 3-family house for a long, long period of time without any objections that we could record, at least. So that's where we were. So there was discussions, as you know, we talked about that. And eventually our office proposed a settlement, really trying to be very practical about this and come up with something that would resolve this without litigation, without a lot of fees, and try to get something for the town out of this. So what we came up with was the settlement you have before you. It's been signed by everybody except me on behalf of the town, of course. And it provides as follows. The first paragraph, there is a monetary payment between the old seller and the old buyer. That has nothing to do with us, but that's part of the stipulation. We have no obligations whatsoever with regard to any money. Secondly, the town acknowledges that the property may be used as a legal 3-family house, provided that one of the 3 units be designated as an affordable unit. And what that means is that it could be rented only to a person who has an income of no greater than 80% of the state median income. And what they do is they record an affordability plan, which outlines the terms. It lasts for 40 years. It'll get filed on the land records. That affordability plan is still in the works. And when it comes, that will be reviewed by Aaron and by me. And then will be recorded, as I indicated. What that does is give the town at least another affordable unit. And in the world in which we live, every affordable unit is helpful in terms of accumulating enough points for a possible moratorium. So that is at the heart of the settlement. There'll be 3 units. One will be designated affordable. There's no admission of wrongdoing by any part here, by any party, I should say. And that's basically it. So the benefits to the town, again, we avoid the expense, we avoid the litigation. It maintains the existing structure. There is a developer who owns it now. He sought permits from the town. That's what generated this problem. Didn't get them. He's going to come back, we're told, and for permits, and we'll fix the place up. Presumably, we'll bring it up to code if that's needed. Presumably, and he'll have his 3 units, one of which will be affordable. And again, it really just acknowledges a situation, in fact, that has existed for a long, long time. So that's really it. I would recommend it. And I have a resolution to propose, which is basically that the town approve the stipulated settlement, which we have now dated November 30, 2022, and authorize me as counsel to sign it on behalf of the town. I'm going to add also that part of the resolution indicate that no permits be issued until the affordability plan has been submitted and reviewed by the town, just so we're a little extra cautious about that. So that's my summary, and I'm happy to answer questions.
We've already moved it at this point too, right? So we're in discussion. Is that? Oh, you're talking on mute, Peggy.
I have to make a motion to approve the resolution. So I'm just thinking, why don't we have our questions now, and then I can make a motion to approve the resolution that Ira has proposed.
Sounds good.
Okay. Al, you had a question?
Yeah, Ira, I wanted to ask you if there are any additional steps that the town needs to take to avoid this kind of situation in the future.
You know, it's a good question, Al. I mean, as a practical matter, you know, there are how many homes? Thousands of homes probably in the town, and these things escape scrutiny unless there's a complaint. Usually, someone says, you know, there's 3 families living next door to me, and then that would generate some review, some enforcement. Potentially, that's what typically happens. This one, I guess, escaped for a long, long time, because it probably wasn't bothering anybody. I think it's a difficult dilemma to get every single unit into full compliance. You rely on people to submit complaints, and then the zoning office goes out to investigate. So this one escaped for a long, long time.
So Ira, it's correct to assume that many towns face this same kind of dilemma of trying to keep track of things which go unreported, so to speak. This is a common dilemma for towns.
It's very common. Yes, it's very common. I mean, there's only limited resources to proactively search around town, and usually zoning enforcement relies upon complaints from people, unless something is really in plain view, some business which is doing something wrong, or you see a house with 10 cars and 6 trucks in front of it. That might be a tip off, but other than the ones that are flagrant and in plain view, we rely on people to report the problems. There's just not enough staff in any town to proactively go after every violation, or discover every violation, I should say.
And I think the age of the property and the fact that there hasn't been a lot of owner turnover for the property, because usually when you have a property change hands, that's when people start, finding things that hadn't been filed or done properly. And so this is kind of a particularly unique situation, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm sorry, yeah, Peggy,
yeah.
because it was in the same family. They made that point to me throughout, that the parents owned it, the father, and then it was to the son, and it was used this way for decades, et cetera. So that was one of their arguments, and then it did turn over eventually to a developer, and that's exactly what happened. The developer came in and said, "I want my permits," and he was told, "Well, you got an illegal situation here."
Any other questions for Ira? Oh, go ahead, Nora.
I just thinking back on what our land use and planning and zoning looked like decades ago compared to what we have today too. It was certainly different, very different. The town was run very differently than it is today, that's for sure. I can remember our land use department being like 2 people. And so it's a whole different ball game. Quite often I'll talk to people about things that they were grandfathered in 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that would never happen today. So I think that's part of it too, as towns have changed the way they administer their town.
Agreed.
That's true also.
So with that, I guess I'd like to make a motion to approve the stipulation for judgment as presented. And Ira, what was it you wanted to add to the motion?
Well, and authorizing me to sign on behalf of the town, that's part of it. And also, what I was suggesting was, since we haven't seen the affordability plan, I just want to close that loose end. And I would add that provided before any permits are issued by the town, the affordability plan be presented and be approved by the town.
Okay. So I'll add those comments. Jacqueline, you got all that? Can you submit that to her to make sure we got it perfectly? But Jacqueline, you got that in the motion?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So
Yes, I'll send it later. Yeah.
Okay, great. So with that, I'm making the motion to approve with the amendments proposed by Ira.
Second.
Okay, Scott. All right. And with that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. So Ira, you have the authority to go ahead and sign the agreement.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks,
for getting
Ira.
that cleared
Okay.
up. So
Thank you. Yep. Bye-bye.
it's always nice to get some more affordable units in town. So I think that was a win-win.
That
for
is
everybody.
awesome.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Next item is number 7. And Aaron can join us for this. This is following up on a discussion from last meeting. Discuss and take action to adopt a resolution regarding opting out of Public Act 2129 accessory apartment provisions.
Morning.
Can I get a second?
I'll move that or second it or whatever you're looking
Whatever
for.
you
Okay,
need.
great.
Yeah, same.
Okay, with that,
Hi,
then, with that, I will turn it over to Aaron to just summarize, because where's the resolution?
I can screen share it if that's easier.
Yeah, oh, that came out separately, didn't it? I remember seeing it. I don't have it in the packet then. Okay, why don't you just screen share it so we've got it on the screen?
Yes.
This was sent out to the board separately, I think.
Okay.
And
this mirrors the resolution of the Planning and Zoning Commission as far as stating the reasons for opting out. It's the only addition from the Planning and Zoning is just documenting the process within your resolution to confirm compliance with the provisions for actually opting out. The need for the Planning and Zoning Commission to hold to notice a public hearing, to hold a public hearing, when they took action, when they published their decision in the source, and then further stating that the Board of Selectmen ratify the vote of the Planning and Zoning Commission and affirmatively opt out of the provisions. And these are based on the following reasons. We're in the process of updating our plan of conservation and development, which will guide our future updates to the zoning regulations. and hopefully a comprehensive rewrite to those sections. And the second is item number 2 is identifying specifically the areas where our current regulations do not comply or are not consistent, I should say, with the provisions within Public Act 2129. And those are maximum size, required front yards for detached accessory structures, maximum height for detached structures. Scroll to page 2 here. Architectural design standards for exterior changes, periodic renewals, and annual affidavits. And the location where accessory apartments currently are not available in certain commercial zones where single family dwellings are permitted. And then again, that criteria requiring 3 parking spaces for an apartment, which in a lot of newer homes, having a 2-car garage, it's easier to add an additional space for the apartment. But in some of our older homes in town where we only have 1 parking or 1 garage or no garage spaces, this is an added requirement that is not consistent with Public Act. So this is the general resolution reflecting what we discussed last week. And I think if anybody wanted to kind of go over those items that we discussed last week for the reasons of opting out, I'm happy to do so, but I thought since we kind of got into that already, just less than a week ago, maybe you didn't want to go through that whole presentation again in an effort of time. That's up to you.
No, I think that we talked about it at length. At least I know I'm comfortable. I just want to highlight again for the public's benefit that there are going to be some opportunities to align a lot of our things with this Public Act, because the Planning and Zoning Commission will be reviewing. Some of these are very outdated, what we have in our regulations, because they date back to the 80s. But by opting out, we can then cater them to our community. So we can update them, but that doesn't mean we have to do everything exactly like what the state is proposing. So it gives us some flexibility. But there is a commitment, I think, by the Planning and Zoning Commission to review all this and make some updates to it. So with that, I'm comfortable supporting it. Any other comments from the board members or questions? No? All right, well, with that, then I'd like to, I guess we already made the motion, right, to adopt it. So with that, all in favor of adopting the resolution as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. All right, great, Aaron. And we'll look forward maybe, next year in 2023, just hearing some of the possible revisions that are going to be proposed by planning and zoning, for the zoning regulations.
Absolutely.
And at that point, we'll have an affordable housing committee in place that they can weigh in and offer suggestions as well for some of these things. Because ADUs does have offer housing alternatives, I should say, not necessarily deed restricted affordable housing, but housing alternatives and diversity for the community. So as we just saw with the thing that we just approved, right? So that wasn't an ADU, but it was anyway. So, all right, great. Well, moving on to item number 8, update on the tennis court construction project. So Bill McMinn is here to provide us. This was the project that was approved by ARPA. Bill, why are we here today? What's the update? Like the picture.
Sorry about that, and excuse my phone's ringing in the background, so
Yeah.
you have to bear with me. So you're looking for the update on the tennis courts? Is that what
It's on the agenda, so I thought that is there something significant?
Absolutely, there's always significant progress on all my projects. So, and first, I'm gonna pile on. Lauren, great loss. Gonna miss you. Good luck. I could say more, but I think it's been very clear that we're gonna miss Lauren. So I wanted to say that she's a great asset and a great loss. So the project for the tennis courts, very exciting. I was able to, secure an engineering firm who got the plans done at the beginning of the month. With Aaron's help in the land use department, we've been moving the permit process along. We submitted to wetlands, we submitted to P&Z. We have a wetlands walk scheduled and the tentative meeting. So the wetlands walk is scheduled for the 7th of January. The meeting is January 9th. And I believe we have a tentative public hearing for P&Z on the 19th. All this is tentative, and talking with Aaron, none of it's formalized yet, but I think that's the tentative plan. We have it out to bid at the same time. Normally we wait, but we don't have time. If we want to get it done this summer, we have to do it at the same time. So it's been out to bid the same time last week. We're having a walk with contractors that are interested this week. And it's a quick turnaround town. On the 20th of this month, I hope to have the bids back. We've just discussed and talked with contractors. They believe they can get us prices within that time frame. And as long as we give them the green light with a reasonable time frame, they think they can get it in next summer. There is a discussion whether it's a 10-week process or a 14-week process. It's going to be weather dependent. The school is going to be flexible as much as they possibly can. We want to get it done during the summer and not interrupt the school. So
that's something I think it's important to highlight, that timing is very important for these projects, because if you miss the window to get the approval so that they can do the project this summer, you have to wait a whole nother year. And so, that's one issue that I think we bumped up against at times, because I know this requires a lot of different regulatory bodies that it has to go through. And so we just ask that, people understand that these are priority projects, and that we're trying to get this done for the summer months, because otherwise there's a whole nother year that has to be waited, because you can't do this kind of work during the school year, because it would be a little bit too disruptive to the school. But it sounds like you've got a great timeline, and hopefully you can keep to it, right?
it's very, very tight, as long as everything goes well. And, we're going to get the permits, I believe, from the regulatory agencies. We're taking a 4 courts and expanding a little bit, so we get 6 courts. And, part of the proposal, and it might be the only, I think, controversial thing, is that we're going to propose lights. But it's down in a hollow. I don't really think that's going to have much effect. I'm optimistic that it's going to go well.
Good. Any other questions for Bill? No? All right. Thank you for the update.
Sorry, Peggy, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Couldn't get that mute button off fast enough. Bill, at any time during this process, were pickleball courts talked about? Is there any room for them? Or
I'm glad you brought that up. So
good.
Pickleball has been talked about a lot, and it's part of the proposal. It's, relative to the cost of the project, it's not a lot of money. So pickleballs are part of this project. The magnitude of it, where they're going to go and how they're going to be placed is to be resolved once we get the contractor on and we make the final decisions. But it's definitely part of the proposal. The details we haven't resolved, but it's definitely in the project.
And Bill, as you know, over the last 2-3 years, all of a sudden you see teenagers playing it. So it's getting to be something for all ages. It started out, as most of us know, for young retirees, but that certainly has changed. It's really become a family sport. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
The best part about managing projects, I take my lead from whoever's making the decision, and I make it happen. I don't have to make those hard decisions, or what color it's going to be, or how the net's going to look, So I just get it done.
Yeah. Well, pickleball lines will definitely be part of the final product, and I know that was actually a requirement for the ARPA funds approval. So it'll certainly be there. I think they're trying to make sure it's balanced with the needs of the school, but also schools starting to have pickleball and gym classes. So it's a win-win. So. All right, thanks a lot, Bill.
Bill, is there any, I'm just curious though, to that point, is there any guidelines that we have to comply to relative to, because obviously the primary reason that we're doing this was to bolster our, 2 tennis teams, boys and girls tennis teams, to have a little more championship courts. Is there any guidelines that need to be complied to relative to pickleball? Obviously the lines are on their courts, so.
So the answer is, I believe, yes. That's why I have an engineering firm on board who designs these things. And I have the athletic director on the team who can help me make sure that we get what they want and that we meet the standards. For the, the tennis is the primary and
Yeah.
the pickleball is going to be the secondary, but I believe they can both, cohabitate and make it happen. I really think it's going to be a successful project. And I think, the discussions, interesting, but I think that's a minor part of the project. We're building a huge project, and the line painting, we will definitely take into account and make sure it complies with, the standards. I don't see an issue with that.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Got a lot on his plate for sure. So
Yeah, a few projects.
because the next
Yeah.
item on the agenda,
You work until you're 100 now.
we're going to get every penny we can out
This
of him
isn't
before
work.
he
This is
retires,
fun
so.
for me. I love it.
I love that.
So moving on to item number 9, then, discuss and take action to award the request for proposal for the Brown Intermediate School interior renovations to WJ Mountford Company in the amount of $4,753,000, and to authorize the first selectwoman to sign all contracts and documents associated with this award.
So moved.
Moved.
Okay, great. So this was for the piece of the Madison School Renewal Plan that is relating to Brown, and excited that we got back a proposal that's in budget, which is great. And so, Bill, I don't know, maybe just highlight real quickly what's going to be done in this project, but this is a great thing, and the timing would be this summer, right? On
So it's
this?
going to be hard for me to keep it short because I'm pretty
Yeah.
excited about this
Okay.
project. And the numbers came in unbelievable. We had 8 contractors. The numbers were all tight. It's what you want when you bid things out. I have to point out that, Tecton, the engineering firm, architect engineering firm that we hired to do this project, is also doing the school. So the comparison of we're trying to do the equity of the new school versus renovating Brown. So the whole project is really positive. I was very concerned, with the economy and the construction about these numbers and how they're going to come in. Colliers has been on our team for many years. They gave us, the preliminary stuff, but you don't know what's going on today. They came in right on. The low bid is a great firm. We've looked into them. They've done a lot of schoolwork. So I just can't talk enough about the excitement for this. The committee met with the firm, and it's just a home run. So I don't want to elaborate much more. I'll rather answer questions because I could talk for 20 minutes about the excitement of this and how well it's going and the numbers. And it is a summer project. Once again, it's a summer project. All the heavy construction is going to be done during the summer, but the wing is off on its own. So we could, and we are going to plan, if we need to, finish the painting and the light construction off on its wing, separate from the school. So we won't disturb the school if we have to. We haven't negotiated finally with the contractor about what he can get done this summer, but we have options. And it's not just renovation of one wing. It's redoing the bathrooms. It's redoing all the doors. And it's pretty exciting. I'm happy to go.
Is it that back wing, Bill?
Yes.
I'm trying to just visualize
It
it.
used to be the 6th grade wing when the school was first opened. They call it the 300 wing. I call it the K1 because it's a kindergarten, 1st grade wing, and it's in the east side of the building. So I call it the K1 East wing.
And just so, if there's any members of the public or parents that have children at Brown, just so they understand, there actually might be an impact in terms of configuration of the school for next school year, right? And that'll be communicated by the district. But this would mean that, they're going to be moving things around while they do some of the work that's being approved.
There's a potential we'll have the east wing closed for a few months,
right,
during school. Won't disrupt the school, but it will reduce some of the areas that they use now. But the exciting part is, then we'll have it up and running, and it's going to be exciting to see, the first. We're going to get a sneak peek of what the new school is going to look like, because we're going to build those classrooms, those K1 classrooms, to mirror the new school. So that's going to be pretty exciting, and really didn't think about it until the money came in and we can actually get it done. I'm pretty excited because we'll be able to put the finishes. The rooms are going to be set up with the new technology, I hope, and maybe not the technology. Maybe we won't put that up, but it's going to be exciting.
All right. Well, any other questions for Bill? No.
It's exciting times here, Bill. Look at you.
Yeah.
You got all these great projects.
It is definitely, a very positive time, and we got some really good stuff going on. So
Any good home renovations you want to talk about?
my wife is doesn't have any plans. That's my wife's job. I
Yeah,
say-
well, I was gonna say, he doesn't have time for that.
You don't
stuff,
bring it
so,
home?
Yeah.
No. My wife handles it. She does a great job. If you want to talk about the kitchen she did on ours and a bathroom, I built the house myself in 90, and then she's been renovating ever since.
That's awesome. I love it.
All right, well, with that, I guess we're ready to vote. All in favor of approving the request for proposal as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All right, great. Congratulations on that. It's exciting to see that moving forward. So
Thank
item number 10, and we can invite Lauren up so she can actually, because she was helpful in moving this forward, as well as Aaron. I think Aaron was involved in this. Obviously, this is a discuss and take action to approve the application for the Connecticut Deep Climate Resilience Fund Track 2 pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved.
Okay, great. All right, discussion, if you want to summarize this application.
If no one seconded it, Peggy, I will.
Oh, I thought somebody, okay, all right, Noreen seconded it then. Great. All right, trying to find the stuff in my packet again, because this one. Okay, Lauren, do you want to give a summary of this?
Yes, so this is a
Great.
new DEP climate resilience grant that came out just this year. And I worked with Aaron Mannix, the town planner, and Johnny I, the director of public works and engineering. And Aaron also reached out to the Coastal Resiliency Commission to try to determine which project would make the most sense to fit into the parameters of the grant funding. And the Coastal Resiliency Commission, as well as staff, agreed that there was one project that was currently in CIP that was the best fit for the grant for this year. So the project itself focuses on the Middle Beach Road neighborhood, which includes Middle Beach Road, Island Ave, Prospect, Texas Road, and other sections of Middle Beach Road West. And it is going to fund, hopefully, a study that would help us mitigate those impacts of sea level rise and storm drainage from storm events in that section of the town. So the current CIP plan has $100,000 in it this year for planning, and then additional money in the plan for the project itself that would come from the plan. So this grant application is asking for all of the planning dollars, as well as some other support dollars for how we would run public meetings and public information sessions and solicit resident input, so that we made sure that the plan was the best fit going forward. And then one aspect of this grant that was a little different than other grants is that it required us to commit to applying for federal funding for the project itself. So the intent of this grant is, if it is awarded, it will cover that first year CIP cost, and then also fund some grant writing services based on the plan to get you a future grant for the project itself.
Which is great, because this would help a lot, as our strategy has always been to pull things out of CIP and get them funded by grants, or we've been doing ARPA funds also. So, and I know that drainage system was one that we had added as part of our coastal resiliency planning efforts. I think it was 2 years ago when we set up the coastal resiliency fund. So this will help save some money if we get the grant, which is always great. Any other questions about the grant application? Okay, we're just applying. Obviously, we'll have to vote to accept if we are awarded it. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Great, thank you so much. And we are working hard to figure out our next phase, transition phase, because obviously Lauren's been spending a lot of time on grants, which was the new position she had kind of taken up in July. And so far, we've had a great win rate so far. So let's hope we keep that win rate going. Okay, moving on to item number 11. Discuss and take action to approve a special appropriation request of $78,395 for the emergency replacement of a building UPS system at the Madison Police Department pending Board of Finance approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. And I'll invite up Jack and Sam, I think is on for this as well, and Ed Brunt. This is coming from the police department, right? Okay, great. Good morning, guys.
Morning.
Good morning.
So Jack, if you want to kind of explain what happened here and, why this is so urgent.
Okay, the UPS system, the uninterrupted backup power system, which has been in the building for as old as the building is. We've had a couple catastrophic failures within the last 24 months. We somewhat patched it last year. Essentially what it does, it keeps power going. When we lose power, we lose voltage. In our application with all the sensitivity that we have to records and the CAD system and transmissions with the fire, police, OEMS, it's obviously very dangerous when this happens. I think last week was kind of like the last straw. It went out on us twice. We were able to bring back half the system. We had to bring techs in and they said, listen, you have to replace this. And that brings us to here today. Ed, if you want to expound on that a little more.
Yeah, the current system is actually obsolete. We are expecting to replace it in the next couple of years anyway. The batteries have to all be changed out in 2025. So we did get a quote to repair the current system as it is. It's a problem with the switching. And the issue is when it was installed in 2000, when the building was built, the code was slightly different. And it does not have a maintenance bypass switch. So in order to work on this system, you need to shut power down to the whole building. And it becomes a very labor intensive and difficult project. If we put a new system in, they will install that switch. They'll shut it down once to install that maintenance bypass. And then any future repairs can be done with the power off. The technicians prefer to work on it with the power off. So yeah, we did get a quote to repair the existing system, which is obsolete, no longer supported by the manufacturer, Liebert. It came in around $21,000, and it's at a point where it's not worth expending that kind of money for this old system, and just better off replacing at this time a couple of years ahead of schedule.
Was this, I was just trying to remember, is there a line item in CIP to account for this? Or is this one of the things we were talking about? We need to start having a equipment replacement account for these types of things.
We don't have a replacement account for that large an item. That probably would,
Yeah.
I think we're trying to get a couple more years out of it. That item would have been on probably a CIP initially.
Yeah. Okay.
But just one other thing to add to that, if I may, there's also a secondary we could add to that. I'm going to ask Sam to expound a little more on that. Where we could do a direct fiber right to the tower, to the site there. It's probably an additional $10,000 as an additional backup. Sam?
Okay, so first off on this UPS, it's definitely a vital part of the whole system. As you can imagine during the storm, the whole, the power is vulnerable when trees are coming down. And that's what happened is last week on the 30th, knocked out the power to town hall for, a short time. And that little glitch without this UPS, keeping everything crashed, our whole CAD system, and everything was down for about 45 minutes. And that's, to me, that's unacceptable when you got people on the road during these emergency situations. The other thing is we found an issue with the fiber from the tower behind the arts barn to the PD. When Verizon was adding their cabling, their fiber, they actually cut our line, and it took our radio system down. And so now that's another single source of failure. And we can put a microwave on the tower up there and go down to the PD as a backup. It wouldn't have to be that robust, but it would keep our communications up and running for our towers. I know Ed's going to meet with one of the vendors shortly to get a price, but it's probably in the $10,000 range.
So is that part of the 78 though, or are you asking us to amend?
No,
that?
that's addition two. So I don't know.
That would be down the road. Just I'm putting that on the table so people can understand. We need to replace we have to replace this UPS system. We really don't have a choice. It's at this point, we really can't keep trying to patch it.
Yeah,
Okay,
the urgency is the UPS. That needs to be replaced ASAP.
Okay, so I guess you would be coming back, or we would figure out how we would fund the other 10 or so. You'll get a price quote on that, and then we'll address that. I mean, I guess the other option is we could approve this. We could add another $11,000 onto this, amend the motion now so that you have it if you can get it within that budget amount. What does the board feel? Would they rather just deal with the 78 right now, or just because otherwise they'll have to come back again anyway? Is it one vendor that would do this, or is it totally separate?
The 78 is a solid figure. That's what we have from the vendors, which are also state vendors, to replace the system, the UPS system. Okay. We don't have a concrete on an additional backup, and I'll use the term down the road, not too far down the road, but right now the crisis would be replacing the UPS system.
Okay.
I think I'd be inclined to focus on the existing UPS system, Peggy, at this point, not just given we don't have an estimate.
Okay. All right. With that, then I guess all in favor of approving.
Can I just ask one more question? Sorry.
Oh, yep.
So just given the $78,000, does that represent like the best price? You know, did we go? You know, how many vendors did we look at? Contractors, et cetera.
Can I answer on that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I've spoken to two contractors, and the $78,000 price includes all of the labor. I had another price that includes just the equipment, and he was a little iffy on the labor. I'm pretty sure we can get it done somewhere in that ballpark. And we're going to continue to, weigh the options of what equipment is offered and try to get it done around that number. But we know that for this price, 78, we can get the entire project done. We might be able to do a little better, but this is a number that we feel comfortable with.
These are also vendors that have a history with working on the system.
On this type of system, Jack?
This system, our system in particular.
So it's a known vendor.
It's kind of like our plumber.
Nice.
Are they also on the state contractor list?
I believe he's a certified vendor from DEMAS. I said it wrong. Administrative Services, DAS.
Okay.
They set the state bid.
But I guess but I think Scott's is a good one though, because we're not actually approving the vendor, we're approving a dollar amount. So if you're able to get something, maybe we should just do up to $78,395. I'll amend that motion, because if you can get a better, if you go back to I know you got two of them here, and they're able to come up with something that is, significant enough savings. Are you saying you would go with the other contractor? Because the numbers here are lower, but they don't include labor, right?
Correct.
So you're still kind of weighing both. You just need to get.
We just need more data for the second vendor.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll actually amend the motion to approve a special appropriation request of up to $78,395. So if you can get it lower, that's great. And then you can work the two of them for the emergency replacement of the building UPS system.
Second.
Okay. All right. And if there's no further discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I think one of the things, just so the board knows, because I know we had some different questions come up that are all good questions. We do have that sheet that I plan on starting January 1. Every time you get something like this that you're going to be voting on, it's going to have a checklist, and it'll answer all those questions for you on the checklist about how many bids were received. Is it part of the state bid list? Is it, what, just a lot of details. So that way you'll have all that in advance. We just haven't finalized that form yet, but it's almost done. So, and we'll plan on using it starting in 2023. Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to disband the ad hoc ARP funding committee. Yeah, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this is kind of a follow-up to our discussion. We received a memo from the ARPA committee that they feel that they have fulfilled their duties, and there's some remaining funds in ARPA left that still need to be distributed, but they felt that it was better to kind of transition that back over to the town and let the town finalize the remaining disbursement of the ARPA funds. And I don't know, Al or Noreen, you're both on that committee, but this was a decision the committee felt it was the right move, and we talked about it at our last meeting. So we would just basically, and it kind of gives clarity to the public so that we can remove the ARPA, submitting things to the ARPA committee and all that other stuff on the website, so they know directly to go. We'll have new instructions about directly going to the Board of Selectmen if we're going to offer that. And later on the agenda, we'll talk about the process. But with that, this, I guess,
Peggy, I think
Yep.
the Board of Selectmen should take great comfort in having set up a very good process for making decisions about the distribution of the ARP funds. The committee functioned very effectively, and I think generally reached unanimity on almost every single project that was considered. I think it was an excellent model. I was felt very satisfying to participate in it. And I know it's unusual for a committee to get to a point where it says it's time for us to disband, but I think you've correctly cited the reasons in our thinking. Noreen, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with everything Al just said. It really came down to, we had a few last projects or proposals that we were looking at, but I mean, it was under $50,000 that we had left. It was closer to 40, I think. And we just felt that overall, as the Board of Selectmen has to approve these projects anyway, as things came in, or something we as a board have been working on, to give the board access to the few dollars left would be the right way to go, instead of just spending it to spend it. But I agree with Al, it was a great committee to work with.
Great. No, we were, I think they did a great job, and there was a lot of good that went out to the community through this. And I think what we'll try to do is kind of publish I don't want to call it a report, but some sort of summarizing, the process, all the good projects, so that the public is aware, because I think a lot of times people don't know how these funds are spent, even though we talk about them in meetings and we vote on them and all this other stuff. I think it'd be good to have some sort of summary report so that we can just give out, have it available on the website about the process and how we spent the money. And I think then we just have to kind of, I guess, technically vote to disband the committee, since it's ad hoc. Normally is 2 years, and this is shy of 2 years. So with that, I guess all in favor, with gratitude, of disbanding the ARPA committee, say aye. Aye. Okay, great. Aye. All right, great. And thank you for your service. Those who have served, especially Al and Noreen. I know it was quite a time commitment for a while when they were really busy with applications. Okay, so leading on to the discussion, though, because we still have some funds remaining, there was one project I thought that we had actually talked about. Well, let's get it in. I'll read the motion first. Discuss and take action to approve the ARP round 12 projects, total expenditures not to exceed $20,000, pending Board of Finance approval. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, great. So this is relating to the dog park. And just to give you a little bit of history, this was actually earmarked as a project that we had wanted to use ARPA funds way back when, but we were able to find some money in the Beach and Rec budget relating to projects that had been going on at Salt Meadow where they came in under budget. So I think the board voted about 18 months ago to redeploy about $21,000 or whatever towards the dog park. Austin put together a great plan that was modeled off of what other dog parks throughout the state look like in terms of the materials that were used for the fencing, and a whole plan was put in place. And then he started the process to go through planning and zoning. Unfortunately, or I shouldn't say unfortunately, but as happens, planning and zoning, or actually he went through ACA, which is the Committee on Architectural Standards that usually give recommendations to planning and zoning. And they came back and said, well, we don't want just what the run-of-the-mill dog park is throughout the state. They wanted to make this something very special and unique, and they requested some additional upgrades to the fencing, landscaping, things that had not been a part of the original budget. These are turning into a much more expensive project now. So with that, I thought, well, let's go back to the ARPA funds again, because as we know, pets have exploded, because of COVID. Everybody got their COVID pets. This has obviously been a project that's been around for probably at least a decade. And we're so close to the finish line. We have a design, we have a location, that was supported by the Salt Meadow Committee and the Beach and Rec Committee, and the Board of Selectmen had voted on this. But now we have this community standards group that wants to make this, a much, to their credit, I think, a much more, a higher standard level, I guess, for the fencing. So I'll let Austin talk a little bit about the differences in the materials and why the cost has gone up. So, and where he is in the process with this.
Morning, everyone. So yeah, we are so close to the finish line on this project, and this will allow us to get there. So originally the project was to be 5-foot tall black chain link fencing, as all other dog parks usually are. Maybe not the height of 5 feet. 5 feet is sort of should be the standard. So we wanted to be at that height as well. But after going to ACA, they requested that I go and look at other materials, specifically cedar post and rail. Bless you, Scott. Cedar post and rail fencing. So we did that. So we are going to go with a 4-rail cedar post and rail. So still 5 feet high, 4 rails with a galvanized weld wire on the inside, which will be black. So it'll blend in. You won't be able to see it for the entire park. So yes, it will fit in with the, the layout and the landscape of Salt Meadow. If you've been to Salt Meadow, you'll notice there's cedar railings throughout the park. So this will blend in quite well, while still, adhering to standards of which dog parks should meet, with the height of the fencing. And we'll also be adding plantings along the Route 1 side, to sort of block the view of the fencing. So I've partnered with Bob Cookta, who everybody knows, to develop a planting plan, and I should have that by the end of this week from him. So at least 5-foot tall plantings along the Route 1 side of the fence, as well as some larger shade trees that will go inside the park. Shade trees take, a long time to mature enough to actually throw some shade. So this funding will allow us to purchase, a more mature tree that would, have some immediate effect on the shade at the park. And this will also—
These are just in the dog park area, Austin, the
Yes.
shade trees?
Yeah, yep. It also includes signage and pet waste apparatus that if you've been to a dog park, you've seen. I can show you pictures. I can show you samples if you want, but that's sort of where we are right now.
How are we doing on budget, Austin, relative to, I recognize the hard work that, the ACA group did and put forward some recommendations and changes. Did that impact the budget per se on what we're recommending to create the park?
It did. So originally we had about $21,000 budgeted for this project. Going up to cedar posts and rail and weld wire and the plantings. So plantings, I'm not sure about. I'll know more info about that. That's why we put into this proposal not to exceed number. But with the fencing, yes, cedar posts and rail and weld wire bumped it up about $5,000. So yeah, we wouldn't have enough money to complete this project without this additional funding from the ARP funding.
And I think one of the points that my understanding, I didn't attend the meeting, but from talking to Austin, is that because this is along Route 1, this is going to be a very visible dog park.
Yep.
A lot of other towns' dog parks are kind of back roads in the back,
Yeah.
So they were concerned about visibility. We have this beautiful park, and do we want to just have a bunch of chain link fence at the entrance to our park? So I think it was worthy of the discussion, and I was relieved actually that the upgrading of the fencing was not as expensive as we originally thought. We thought it was going to like triple the budget. So luckily that came in reasonable. The landscaping obviously is another piece. But that's all to kind of keep the visibility and the, just kind of, so visually, so it's a more attractive thing that you see when you're driving by on Route 1. And I will say that when this originally started, this project, Scott Erskine had a $40,000 placeholder for the dog park. And then we thought we hit the jackpot 18 months ago when we said, oh, the fencing's coming in a lot lower than we expected. And then we were able to find the money within the Salt Meadow budget because of some savings from other projects there. So we didn't have to come to ARPA for this. And then now we're kind of circling back where we were, with the additional funding that we're requesting. So, and this is one where if this gets approved, it'll go to the Board of Finance. He's got to go back to ACA again with the landscaping plans, then go through planning and zoning. And then he can get this started probably in February, right? Or March, probably March because of the ground and everything. So we want to make sure he's got the budget in place so that he can finalize the other permitting that's required. So
could I just get a little clarification? The original estimate, the original revised estimate was 20,000 down from Scott's projection.
Right.
This document is asking for another $20,000. Austin, you said the fence was only $5,000.
So 5 for the fence, 5 additional for the fence. Now all the landscaping and plantings, which I'm just not sure what that's going to be. I'm waiting on Bob Cookta to get back to me with the plan, which I'll have by the end of this week. That's why we put in a not to exceed number because I'm just not sure what the plantings and adding the additional shade trees.
trees. Yeah,
it'll be more than
expensive.
just a 5-gallon bucket sized tree. We're talking a more mature tree that'll have immediate impact on the park. Plus the signage and the waste stations as well.
And
So
I
the
understand
hope
we're
is
still
that
going
it's
to have
not-
chain link fence, right? We're still going to have chain link fence. It's just going to be chain
No.
link and cedar.
It'll be
No.
weld wire. Can I kind of show you a picture, Bruce? I share my screen.
Yep, go ahead.
Let's see if I got the right one. That's not it. Hang on. Sorry, we're getting there. So this is an example of what it would look like. So this is the round cedar post and rail. This is the weld wire. So if you're looking, say, where the plants are on the inside, that would be the inside of the dog park. The weld wire will be on the inside to prevent dogs from being able to climb up the fence and escape. And it'll also be black galvanized weld wire. So this picture is sort of as an inverse. It'll be on the inside to prevent dogs from being able to get out.
I mean, I think it's going to look great. It's going to be the most beautiful dog park in the state of Connecticut. So, I mean, I think, you know, the aesthetics are quite attractive. And so, and I think ideally, you know, the landscaping is, we just need the plan, and he wants to make sure he has enough of a budget to cover everything that they're going to require, because they're requiring this before they will give their recommendation. So, so we kind of need this to move the project forward. And I think obviously we're going to try to keep the landscaping budget, you know, reasonable. But a couple of big shade trees might be quite expensive. Any other questions or?
Well, I guess the, you know, I'm trying to tease out the nice to haves from the need to haves. And, you know, every penny we spend out of this fund is not available for some other project that we might have wanted to do. So the idea that we're going to put up visual plantings to block the view from Route 1, does that take away the need for the aesthetic of the cedar fence? If we're gonna block it anyways, why have both?
I don't think it's gonna be blocking it. This is just more to make it even more attractive, I think, because I don't think you could block it, right, Austin? I think this is more enhancements along Route 1.
Right, it's the
muting.
Mute the, yeah, exactly. That's a great word, Scott. To mute the you know, fencing and the sort of the building along of the Route 1 corridor there. And to your point, Bruce, I think, you know, after going to these ACA meetings, these are requests from them, and if they will not approve the plan unless these requests are met. So it'll sort of, if we don't do this, it'll die on the vine. That'll be it.
Does their authority to decline override our authority to approve?
It's really planning and zoning. So they make a recommendation to planning and zoning, and planning and zoning typically will not approve things without ACA's endorsement, I guess, of a project. So the town is no different than the public, you know, so if a developer comes in and ACA says, we want you to add, you know, nicer features on the windows or a different color for the roof, those are the guidelines and recommendations they make to planning and zoning, and they factor that into their decision. You know, there's no hard and fast rule. It's planning and zoning's approval ultimately that we need, right? Correct, Austin? Not necessarily ACA's, but I think that, you know, this is a public property and it's going to be very highly visible. And so the thought was they wanted to make this as attractive as possible and blend in as much as possible. So fortunate we have these funds, right?
But the bottom line is
except that once they're spent on this, they're not available to some other project that we want to do. And we know that there are more projects than there are funds.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, I think what Peggy says is, you know, P&Z does quite often take their recommendations, but they do not have to. They're a recommending committee. They don't make the decisions. They can just recommend. But saying that, P&Z does seriously consider their thoughts.
And is ACA's recommendation or their reluctance to approve not just the fence, but also the trees and the plantings?
Both, yes.
They are expecting Austin to come back with the upgraded fence and a planting plan, right? And so
that's on Tuesday of next week.
Yeah. So, like I said, the intention is to keep the landscaping budget down as much as possible, but just to get this, you know, move forward, we wanted to give him room, you know, until he can get the final budget put together.
And whatever funds are left over, will be returned back to the ARPA for your use.
Listen, I'm beyond thrilled, Austin, that you've gotten the project to this point. I mean, this is a long time coming. I know there's a lot of taxpayers who are very, very interested in this dog park, and I'm sure are appreciative. This is probably a 10-year run, Bruce. I remember probably back one of my first days of being on the Board of Selectmen, we've been talking about a dog park. So I think there's a lot of energy and excitement and need clearly in our town. So I'm thrilled that we're at this point.
No, and I agree. We need to move the dog runs from Bauer to a better space, safer space. I'm just concerned that we've turned a $20,000 project into a $40,000 project.
May I ask, Bruce, money was raised by really the advocates for this project too. I don't know what that amounted to in the end. I don't know if you know that, Austin, at all.
I think it's about $800, Noreen.
Only $800? Oh, okay.
I think there is going to be, though, an intention to have other amenities. And I think the Girl Scouts have come forward with a project, and then so benches and other, watering stations and things like that, that would be done through fundraising. It's easier, though, once you have the park and a plan, to maybe generate for different amenities and things like that. So
yeah, the Girl Scouts are on board for their Silver Project, which is
nice,
the equivalent of like an Eagle Project.
Yeah,
for benches, and there's many ways to raise funds. Once the dog park is built and people use it for adding amenities, memorial benches are something that most dog parks have, and that'll help us in the future. But you need to have a product to sell people. This will allow us to do that.
I think this dog park goes back at least 2 decades, if not more.
2 decades.
And
wow.
I think Bruce has raised a very valid point this morning about how did a $20,000 project become a $40,000 project. And my guess is it was underestimated when it was first brought up. Perhaps all of the line items of cost had not been identified. It's clear the public is making great use of this park. The park is a real asset to the town, and I think ACA is probably giving us very good advice about making sure that this dog park is up to the standards of the rest of the park and up to the standards of what our constituents probably expect us for a town project. So I'm excited to be moving ahead.
Great. We good taking a vote then? All right, all in favor of approving the ARP round 12 projects, please say aye. Aye. Okay, those opposed?
I'm going to vote against.
Okay. Motion passes. Point taken, Bruce, though. I think, it's a struggle. Sometimes the requirements, but we also have to acknowledge that these are committees of volunteers and residents, so they have high bars for town projects. I think
Absolutely.
Al made a great point. So that gets us to item number 14 is the discuss process for reimbursement of remaining ARP funds. And we do have a couple of applications that had kind of been submitted after the ARP committee had it was not going to be moving forward. And so I guess the question is, we could consider those at another meeting, or do we just want to take the remaining funds and put them into the general fund, which is what we can do. Because it's going to be some, 20 something odd $1,000 left. And the ARP guidelines, actually anything under 10 million, the town has full discretion. It's set for paying down pensions and paying down the mill rate. So we could appropriately use these funds for something else. So the question is, there was a couple of applications that came in. I don't know the details of those. do we want to, as a board, deliberate on applications from the public now, or do we just want to say, the process is closed and we're just going to use the rest of the funds for what the board feels is appropriate?
Well, I guess part of deciding what's appropriate is maybe seeing those applications. In the absence of other applications, my inclination would be to apply it to one of the salaried positions that we funded previously out of ARPA, just to coast on that a little bit longer. But if there's a good and worthy request out of the public, then we should probably consider it.
So why don't I will send those out, and then we can kind of decide what we want to do after you've seen the applications. Because my only concern is there was never any kind of formal announcement, to the public about the the committee has obviously talked about it publicly, and we spoke about it at our last public meeting. So, are we setting ourselves up for other people that might want to apply? But
I understand. So maybe send a notice out that we're we're closing the window on that, but anybody that's already submitted, we probably owe them the
consideration. Okay.
Yeah.
So I will do that. I'll send those out, and then we'll take that up at our next meeting. I will plant a flag that there's also another project that had been this board had approved last year. It did not go through the ARPA committee for a CIP project that we had pulled out to use ARPA funds with. Since then, I think there's been some rethinking about that project. And so I might come back and make a recommendation to take that money and apply it to something else. So I'll bring that up. We'll just have that all in January discussion, and then we can look at the other applications as well. So
you might just add, and Al, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there are 3, I don't know the project you're talking about specifically, but I believe there were 3 projects that I've seen or proposals. One of them we did have at our last meeting, and there was really no support for it. And actually, we had turned down other groups of very like projects. And the other 2 are totally new, that's how I recall it, Al.
okay. Yeah. I'll find out what those, I don't know what the applications are. So we'll put it all together. And it's great because you guys will have the background in terms of the committee discussions, and then we can kind of tackle those. So, okay, great. All right, perfect. So then we'll handle that, I think, in probably our first meeting in January. Item number 15, discuss and take action to approve the modified schedule of town campus public hours as follows. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. So I sent the board a memo about this. This has been an ongoing conversation about the late Thursday hours, which I know was originally established, way back before I came into office because of the noon closure on Friday. So you have to make up the time somewhere. And the thinking was that for people who have full-time jobs, it gives them an opportunity to come into town hall, in evening hours. But obviously since COVID hit, and then now we've taken a lot of services online, and we're finding that a lot of the public is using online services, and the foot traffic is extraordinarily light, particularly on Thursday evenings. And so this was kind of a quality of life issue for the staff. You can imagine if you have families and everything else to be here till 6:30 is struggle, to make a soccer game or, whatever it is. And this was seen as something that the staff would still work the full work week hours that they're scheduled to work. But what we would do is allow flex time, either a half hour before public hours or a half hour after public hours. And I know that one of the other point is just having that quiet time to catch up on email or online applications and stuff like that, where you're not getting necessarily interrupted sometimes too. So that's a positive to do that. And so this was kind of a unanimous recommendation, through my steering committee. And I also ran it through senior staff, and they were all very supportive of this change.
Was there ever any discussion, Peggy, not to throw a wrench in everything, but extending Friday to 1 or, whatever.
I was told I would have mutiny.
Fair.
And I'm trying
Point.
to be honest. And I will say that the messaging that is, I don't have the names of the towns, but I know there's been a number of towns that have eliminated Fridays altogether. And so there's this 4-day work week movement that's been going on both in municipal government as well as in the private sector too. I guess there was a big New York Times article about this. I didn't get a chance to read, or Wall Street Journal about corporate moving to 4 days a week. I think that, once again, this is how can we make people, keep people, this is a tough labor market, trying to retain people and make a high quality of life for people who work here. And it doesn't cost money to do this. So I think this was kind of the compromise that was discussed, to address some of the staff's, wanting some changes for Thursday night. So, and flex time, I think, is a great thing because it things change every week, right? So it gives the flex time is now going to be in not public hours, but private hours. So it's much easier for the staff to then work with their supervisor. And, some weeks they have, family commitments early morning to take their kid to daycare or whatever. So that morning they'd like to come in that week, they like to come in at 8:30, but then the next week they can come in at, 8 o'clock and that kind of thing. So it allows some flexibility.
And may I ask a question? Because this Friday afternoon, having that off is relatively new. I mean, it was after I left the Board of Selectmen. That we're a summer beach town. Has that not created any problems not having, really, I'm thinking Beach and Rec not being open?
So I think it's a great question. So these were put in like 2016, 2017 or something. So prior
That's
to
about
my,
right.
yeah. And one of the reasons I wasn't sure this had to be voted on necessarily. And then there was quite a discussion, I guess, by the board about this when they went to the summer hours. Because of some of those concerns. This really affects only town hall, because now we've moved all of Beach and Rec down to the surf club. And even though the office staff will be leaving at noon, they still sell beach passes. So the summer staff is always fulfilling those obligations. And I know as a resident, it was frustrating to show up at 3 o'clock on a Friday and not be able to get a beach pass at town hall before, but that's gone now. You can get into the surf club. There's always staff there now. And I think there was concerns not being able to get a hold of people during summer camps and stuff. That's all been changed because we have the new phone system installed down there so that somebody's always answering the phone. And as I said, the staff has always been responsive, and then people are buying their beach passes online also. So I feel better about that, because that was the first question I had when I came in. I thought, how do you, and it was frustrating for me as a resident, to show up and, try to get some tags or whatever for my guests that were coming, and everything was closed down. So accessibility is still a priority, and that will continue to be the case. And it's not going to impact the, activities. And then also, like for youth and family services, none of this will impact their schedules. They have different schedules accommodating their needs. So this is just more people, walk-ins that are coming to the building department, that type of thing.
Well, as you said, it's a hard job market right now. This to me is an incredible perk for a young mother and father to be able to have for a long weekend. Every weekend is really, I think it makes us very viable to want to come work here, especially with this new flex hour thing. I know things are changing with what's expected from employees.
I like the sound of this. I think yesterday's solution made sense for the conditions of yesterday, and whatever we implemented some years back, I think made a lot of sense at the time. And now the world has moved on, and Peggy, I just wanted to ask you, besides Beach and Rec, are there any other unique situations? I'm thinking of the last day when taxes are due. Are we still seeing traffic at town campus?
We
for
are, I
certain
mean,
selected
obviously,
moments?
yeah, I think the tax thing, but remember now we have drop boxes, which we didn't have before. And people are using online payment a lot more than they used to. So there's been a big shift because during COVID they had to. So yes, we do still see traffic flow, but the tax collector was supportive of this. And the other thing is the town clerk's office. Most of the regular customers are during business hours because you're dealing with lawyers and real estate agents and things like that. But during voting. And that's where, they do have the flexibility to adapt if they need to and extend hours. And then the registrars control their own hours. So voting is the one area that's a little bit of a wild card at times, but I know that they work around the clock anyway. So I think, if they feel that they need to have some sort of extension or change, but Nancy's supportive of this as well. And I had a long talk with her as also. So I think that, I think we should be good. I think like probably when they did the new hours, 5 or 6 years ago, there'll be an adjustment period, but then the public got used to it and the staff kind of adjusted. And it seems, since I came into office, I've never had complaints from the public about lack of accessibility. So we'll see. We'll see if there's a backlash or a concern, we can revisit the policy. But I think it's worth trying, and I think it would go a long way with the staff.
Peggy, may I ask you, is any of this in the collective bargaining?
Our collective bargaining, they have other hours too. So they have their beach and building and grounds and public works work different hours. These are just public hours to town hall. So it does not affect any public collective bargaining agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Said differently, town government doesn't shut down at 12 o'clock on Friday.
Right. Right. This is just when the public can access services at town hall.
Right.
That's really what it is. And like I said, programming doesn't change. Senior center hours don't change. None of these change. It's just those services, in-person services that people sometimes come to, the building department, the land use, the assessor's office, the tax collector, and the town clerk's office. Those are the ones that are primarily affected by this. And you're basically just 2 hours in the evening. And I think I put some traffic flow data in that memo, which is it's been very light when we were tracking it. Okay. So I guess with that, all in favor of approving the new modified town campus public hours, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. And our final item on the agenda is number 16. And this is related to a pilot program that the police department did with Madison Youth and Family Services about a social outreach program. And I know Scott, I want to welcome up Scott Cochran and Chief Drum. And I know Scott has a little presentation that he was going to walk through about this great program. And I think it was a home run and very successful. And I think it shows that we're kind of innovators in this space and addressing a lot of public issues that we've seen over the last couple of years dealing with mental health, and that we're forward thinking. So with that, I will turn it over. Scott, do you want to share your screen? Can you do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I will. And
Okay.
thank you for that lead up, and good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chief Drum. And appreciate your time at the tail end of this meeting. This was a really substantial program. There was a lot of work that was put into this. So I absolutely appreciate the time and attention for what will be a very short presentation. The full report and the executive summary, I think, was attached as a part of your materials for this morning. So you do have that to refer to. So with that, I'm just going to go through our slideshow, and we will then have time for questions at the end. Come on. All right. So this, we're referring to our collaborative pilot social work program that we ran with the police department. This occurred last year. We have what we would identify as our core group of collaborators. So on the police side, that was our police chief, Jack Drum, Lieutenant Jeremy York, myself, and our social work extern, the person who actually provided the social work as a part of the pilot, Tiffany Purvis-Torello. I do want to mention that the lead up into getting this pilot off the ground really took place over a couple of years. There were conversations that the chief would reach out to me, when he would come back from task force meetings that he was a part of at the state level and talking to people, his constituencies, other folks in the state. And, he would give me a call and want to talk out, if we were going to integrate a social worker, how might that look? How might we partner to do that as other towns were looking at this same issue? And there were a lot of challenges with this, as you might imagine. And coming into this, we had no, this is during COVID, we were all stretched. There wasn't really any easy way to kind of get this off the ground. We had actually reached out to a couple of college universities that were training social workers to be embedded with police departments as parts of internships. We had no system or in place for that. We had never done any kind of work, embedding social work with the police department. So we really were starting from scratch. And there was a point just about this time last year where we knew we wanted to get something off the ground and had to really just create something out of nothing. We didn't have a college university to sponsor an intern. So I actually did some work to create what we wound up referring to as an extern, and had to go through some town channels, again, with a lot of people being out last year. So this stretched the whole process. But just to kind of pitch this, there's a lot of work that went in prior to this even getting off the ground last year, and a lot of us stretched to make it happen. So with that, our reasons for doing it really, you kind of start with the Police Accountability Act, a fairly large and complicated piece of legislation that included initially, not, I guess, encouragement, but also like wanting towns and regions to look at the feasibility of integrating social work with police departments. We also felt like this is a way to support police officers. Police officers were just during their normal course of their jobs were encountering people that were at critical points in their need. We knew that this has been happening. And of course, in the times that we are all living in now, and this continues, we're within a mental health crisis. So you were seeing a much more frequent behavioral health crisis. If you're a police officer, you're also looking at much more complicated issues that were coming up as a part of the mental health crisis. And we knew that, where you were able to address something at that moment, you were addressing something that really was likely a part, whether directly or indirectly, contributing to whatever the risk factors, mental health, social service needs, those kind of things. By acting in those moments, you may have the opportunity to remove an obstacle or barrier to resources, and in the process, improve public safety. We created a basic structure for our pilot. So we kind of divvied up how the work would look as we pitched this. So the youth services would be essentially, the implementer of the pilot, do the orientation for the social worker, provide the supervision. The police department would be responsible for the work site, the daily support, obviously the social worker interacting with police officers and coordinating with police officers. And you can see in terms of this concept, also a connection to the community. We oriented our social worker when she started. She met with senior services staff, women and family life center staff, because we knew that those would be likely sources for people that she would need to know. We, at the outset, that core team that we identified, we had 6 questions that we really wanted to be addressed within the pilot. And these are outlined specifically in the full report. We wanted at the outset to look at how we would define a boundary between the work of a social worker and a police officer. As we had no system, we needed a process, we needed procedures. We had to do that, from jump once we got the pilot going. We knew that we wanted to collect some de-identified data about demographics and needs that we were, so being able to protect confidentiality of anyone who interacted with a social worker, but also be able to collect what we could learn about, their age, their issues, and things like that, gender. We wanted to learn about the perceptions of integrating a social worker with police in our town. And at the beginning of the pilot, we felt, we would learn this, through our general experience between the social worker and the officers. We felt about midway through, it would be really helpful to survey the police officers. And so we did develop our own very short survey that we provided directly to the officers as an anonymous method to get more, what we felt would be more objective input towards integrating social work. And all of that's included in the full report. We wanted to know how people would respond to a social worker who received the outreach, and we wanted to learn a little bit about the general experience of the social worker through the process. So the pilot itself, what's on the right there is that was a small leaflet that was given to police officers to provide to people that described what the outreach social worker was and what they could do. You can see on the bottom, we also included phone numbers. So if the social worker wasn't able to connect with that person, they still had some resources that they could connect with. The pilot itself was a 16-hour a week for the social worker at the police department. It occurred between April and May of last year. And essentially, the social worker would go to the police department, would have to review police reports, speak with officers, and we developed a method of identifying cases for potential outreach. So she would look at basically everything that the police were doing, and we had developed a method in which she would pick and choose. We would say that identifying cases for outreach, and then she would make a phone call. So as I was saying, there's a lot of work putting the pilot together. We were limited into what the social worker could do for a lot of reasons. So this essentially was outreach that we could only do with the social worker, making phone calls to people following a police encounter. And as a part of the pilot, we also looked at what kind of factors and things were going on for those cases. And, aside from a phone contact, like what else might we do in the future if we had a social worker? So our social worker provided would do the actual outreach, would identify cases, do the outreach, and then would coordinate with those people. And you'd see this in the full report. In the 2 months, we identified about 67 total cases as appropriate for social work outreach. Of that number, we had 50 people that were actually received the outreach. There were 17 that we felt were appropriate for the outreach. However, there wasn't a sufficient phone contact, or that they had there were circumstances in which they were not reachable following their police encounter. And had a pretty good number in terms of the response. It's all in the full report that you can certainly read. Throughout the running of the pilot, myself and Jeremy York, Lieutenant York, would have regular conversations, and we met as a group, and I met and did weekly supervision with Tiffany. So some outcomes at a glance, out of strictly speaking from the social work outreach perspective, adults out of the people that were identified for outreach, that adults represented 56% of that number. 32% were senior citizens and 12% were youth. 78% of the original police encounters occurred during the afternoon and evening shifts. This was important. One of the pieces that we really wanted to learn, if there were behavioral health issues that were coming up for officers, and what part of the day might they be most likely to occur, so we could know if we were going to pilot something further, where would we put a shift, or how would we want to have a social worker available. We also learned that the public was, when she contacted people, was generally very, not only receptive, but appreciative in many cases. For the officer survey, and again, this is all of the responses to the survey are in the full report, but the ones to point out here, the officers who participated in that survey, 80% reported encountering situations with behavioral health or social services component between several days a week to almost daily. So this gave us an idea of how often officers were coming across these kind of situations. And we asked officers, like, what if there was an aspect of the social worker that they felt was most important or a priority. 75% reported that they would most want the ability of that social worker to be able to follow up following a police interaction. And for that, social worker also to be able to strategize with them to handle or address more challenging or chronic cases in need of outreach, which we found very interesting. We weren't sure how they were going to respond to that particular question. And want to highlight, there was great agreement between our outreach social worker and the police survey around a couple of different things. The big ones were behavioral health, substance abuse, domestic violence, and issues related to the care of the elderly were the most common types of issues that we were identifying and need for police, for social work as a part of an integrated response. And that the officers widely viewed the benefit of any kind of social work outreach as good for them as well as good for the people, that there was a lot to be gained from this type of approach. And if we were going to develop this further, having the ability for the social worker to do more than phone calls, to go out, be on scene, do follow-up home visits, that was really critical. And the report goes to great lengths to kind of speak to that point. And the purposes of that, crisis de-escalation, field psychiatric assessments, to be able to do that with some expertise. And I think for us, some internal knowledge of the local resources, as well as we might know a family or a situation as a department a little bit better than a regional crisis service that might be coming in a little bit more cold to our community to do those. And that benefit of having some follow-up visits. As we look forward, we do feel like the needs are very much present now. And, it's the mental health crisis continues. We have stressors that are continuing on our youth, but also across the board that we see with adults. We all know that we're living in some difficult financial times. There's just a number of continuing stressors that people are experiencing. So we can expect the need for mental health, the need for outreach to continue probably at a pretty higher level than perhaps we would prefer. We know that social workers are being integrated in police departments all across the state. A lot of them are using substantial amounts of ARPA funding in order to pilot what they're doing. And almost all of them are finding outside agencies to partner with. Police departments don't have internal resources to do this, so they have to find willing and working partners. A lot of what we did in our pilot, we actually worked with Brantford. We looked at what Brantford was doing with their full-time social worker, and that helped us quite a bit. And we do feel as a group, now is a good time and an important time to explore how we might look at doing this, continuing the work, developing a model for Madison as a collaboration. And we believe that's important. That's an important discussion to have. With that, we'll get into questions. I do want to thank the police chief. I want to thank Lieutenant York, Jeremy York. What an absolute treasure that man is. Both men, but particularly Jeremy, as a partner in working with this. He was, our conversations. We learned so much just by talking to each other about the challenges for police officers. Great thanks to Tiffany, who was a social worker. Did not yet have her MSW at the time that she was doing this. She was adding this externship to her current internship, and she just did a phenomenal job behind the scenes as well as doing the outreach. So really grateful to her and grateful to the town because you all permitted us to stretch a bit to do this pilot. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and let you guys ask what you want to ask.
Scott, this is fascinating stuff. Can you give us an example of an interaction or an intervention that took place during this pilot that very much exemplifies the value to the community?
You know what? So I will, but I won't use an actual example. I'll make a sort of a gross exaggeration for the purposes of protecting some confidentiality. I don't want somebody to recognize their scenario, as I describe it. So think about one scenario where a police officer maybe is called to a store for somebody who's stealing something. And so that person then has to interact with law enforcement over a report of a crime that they've committed. So this would get logged into a police report. The police report, the officer may give some circumstances. So let's say that the person talked about why they were stealing something from that store, that they're broke, that they have needs, that they're under certain amounts of stress. As that would get into a police report, as some circumstances around that interaction, the social worker would see that and could then do follow-up and then could reach out to that person from the standpoint of a social worker. So now it's anonymous. You can talk to me, it's confidential. One of the parts of the system that we developed, so police work was police work. When the social work got involved, that became, we used all of our existing youth services, existing policies, procedures to protect confidentiality and HIPAA. So once that person was now interacting with a social worker, the conversation was very different. It went from what you did wrong to what do you need? And what we found was people then sharing what was going on for them, and then we could help. It's remarkable, that we do have quite a bit of services local in town and access to things outside of our town. And then once you start saying, well, what do you need? You can start, the social worker would then start sharing more about, have you tried our social services? Are you aware of this program? If there were needs for mental health care for somebody that was a part of the stressor, then you could start giving resources to help that person. One of the neat things we found in the pilot, you would identify an individual for the outreach, but then you would learn more about everything going on within their family, and you could provide resources for everybody in that family. And there's a neat chart in the report that looks at, so where we provided resources for maybe 50 people, there were resources that were provided actually for more like 80 or 90, because we could look at the family and say, well, part of why you're under stress is because your child needs care or because your parent. So adults made up the vast majority of people that were interacting with the social worker. There were more than a handful of adults who were trying to care for an elderly parent. And so now it's senior services in our town or it's senior services somewhere else. And should also point out, seniors are probably a population in which would benefit greatly from this. And we found that out in the pilot. Either they were known to senior services, and perhaps this would be a way for us to say that there are new needs or things that were being unmet, or that they didn't know about senior services, and then we could make connections between them and Heather. So I hope that answers your question.
I guess I'm curious from Chief, your perspective. Obviously, we're getting the sense, that it was a pretty successful program. But what do you think on the interaction and the sort of the success of this program for the town? I mean, clearly it's an innovative thing. We're sort of leading the edge here. This was a big deal for Madison to undertake this, but we clearly see a tremendous amount of upside.
Okay, good morning, all. I guess just a very brief history. Police Accountability Task Force, which came out with the 4143 points of reform in policing. Section 18 had to do with the feasibility impact of a social worker responding to calls for service within a police environment. Let's face it, there's a mental health crisis post George Floyd. A lot of the studies have shown us that, hey, this is happening. We have to find a better way, particularly law enforcement, to handle these. Subsequently, a task force was established, a subcommittee. I served on both committees, racial profiling and the mental health, people with disabilities, which this is a component of. Madison kind of was showcased in this. Madison Dispatch Center was also showcased in this, and our response to this. There was a couple different programs out there, people trying to put it together. They have successfully. We somewhat did this, with Scott's input, tremendous input, we put together a program which I think has worked well within the town of Madison, and most certainly The state of Connecticut, the IMRP up at UConn's public policy embraced what we've done. Little kudos, Scott, what you wrote, 35 pages, that's a white paper, that's a how-to, that's being applied now within the state system. This came out of committee favorably. It's going to be made law July 1st, people with disabilities. What they found, if I go between what we've read, we worked hard to gain the respect of the community, and this was another tool that one helped the officers and able to complete their task. It was another tool in getting the confidence, particularly people with disabilities within the community. People with disabilities don't want to tell you their problem. They don't want to put it in a database so that we can respond better. And this overcame that. The fact that we had so many cases in a short period of time is evident that it's an area that has to be addressed. It's an area that we have to have the tools in the box and able to perform the tasks. I think that there's been other discussions. Well, can we share it with another community? Can we share somebody? I think the approach we took doing our own pilot program, and thank you again, Scott, and to Madison Youth and Family Services, and most certainly to Ms. Torello, the MSW student. I think it was a smart move. I think we did it at a low cost. We ramped up to it, which brings us to where we are today. I think we'd like to continue with the success that we have. And some folks have come to rely on this in the field, embedded, we'll call it the police. It has worked. I don't really want to, I think that we have successes within a part-time environment in this program. I don't think branching out to other communities would be appropriate at this point. What works maybe in one community may not work within our community. So again, I think it's worthwhile. I think a lot of time and effort went into it. I thank my officers for their dedication to the program, their involvement, and they feel very, very confident that the use of an MSW embedded within a police environment, not putting them in harm's way, is going to help us in the long run to reduce calls for service, particularly in the areas of mental health, and bring closure to people's environment. That's one of the biggest problems in dealing with people with disability, people with mental health issues, is follow up and getting them the proper treatments or proper answers to their challenges.
I want to thank you. I'm sorry, excuse me. I just want to thank you both. When people hear about this, as was introduced with the Police Accountability Bill, right away they thought of putting social worker in harm's way. And that what we were talking about was when police officers go out on a domestic violence call, they would bring us a social worker with them. And your explanation today and the project you worked on is so beyond that. And I think that's what most people don't understand. And I think this is excellent. I congratulate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a couple of questions, Jack. I think you were hinting at it. There are mandates that will be coming down from the state regarding this. And could you just talk a little bit more about how this pilot is in alignment with those mandates and where, if anywhere, it might be a little bit short?
Okay. During the course of the subcommittees, they've spoken with many communities that had something in effect already or were working towards that. So we use folks that, one in particular, Dr. Megan Peterson from IMRP at Public Policy at UConn. She kind of led this, spearheaded with another gentleman, Dr. Jonathan Slifka, who's the director of people with disabilities within the state. And in law enforcement, the cops, they tend to circle the wagons when there's an issue. So what we did was we just made it clearly transparent, and we said, what would you like us to do? How can we get this, make it better? They were fascinated as to what our dispatch center had in the CAD system of actually how we respond to people with disabilities in town. Basically, in the premise file, we put people that would give us the information voluntarily. And we've done outreach to get people to help us so that when we respond to an emergency or an incident at their home, we have this information. They were somewhat fascinated what we had done. So they focused on it. They did a live telecast from our department, right from the dispatch center, answering questions of other MSWs or people that are in this program for different universities as to how it worked. We gained momentum. We took a lead within the task force. It came out favorably. So what does that mean? I think those who serve in the General Assembly, Noreen, you probably could say it best, is that once it comes out favorably, most certainly with disability, it's going to pass for July 1st. I don't know if that answered it.
Well, I think, and this, sort of leads me to the follow-up, maybe to Scott. In one of your slides, you had priorities for developing the role, and you have a crisis de-escalation, which to me says a social worker on scene, as an officer is responding, and that isn't a shift work, right? That's 24/7. So that's not going to be resolved with a full-time or part-time person. So I guess my question is this all heading towards a social work staff that is on call all the time?
So we essentially have that now. We do have the youth services does carry, we have an after-hour cell phone. We don't promote it as a crisis line because it's a cell phone that our staff share. So we are able to respond mostly to social services issues that come up in the off hour. So that's something that we already have in place. With this, and I think you raise a really good point, and something that we've started to talk about as we develop this. If it's a part-time person, we could establish, a number of hours that we know that the person is going to do on a, sort of as a daily shift. And then we would need to think about other days where that person would be maybe, the first one to respond on call, and, identify a number of hours that we would be able to pay that person to respond. And if anything that falls outside of that, we could develop a system with the youth services, or we could look at maybe that goes back to what is now, where if you needed a crisis social worker, that you'd have to look to a regional resource that already exists now. So I think we would just have to kind of understand what we could do with the position and the funding and the support we have now, and then see how that works. That might be enough for us, and maybe we don't need to develop it further. And we might find that this is something that is very beneficial and needed, and maybe we expand it. But for now, I think we sort of stay in this lane and ramp up more towards, in the way that we're doing.
Well, and I think that's my point, is as distressing as it is to hear these statistics, I think, Jack, your point is well taken. We are living in an era of mental health crisis. And if, the only thing that I think wrong for us to do right now is to dismiss this as a non-issue. And really, we need to talk honestly about what are we going to do to take this on head on. And if that is that kind of social work staff, it is what it is. We just, we can't put our heads in the sand around this issue.
What we found, for a lot of the officers, the experience was finally we have closure to some people's issues, or put them in the right direction for help that we couldn't do before. And then you end up with returning to the same household time after time. It actually has lessened that impact because we put people in the right direction and place them, well, certainly with the yeoman's work of Youth and Family Services and other folks that are involved in the program. So to see the statistic with a law enforcement over 80% is sort of, they were excited about this. It worked. And when it first came out, people said, "Oh boy, you're putting them in harm's way." We would never put an MSW in harm's way. But for the cases, listen, we do 10 involuntary committals on average monthly in this town. People that are in crisis. This is a tremendous tool, and I really would like to see it continue. And I think it's going to help us down the road, and we'll certainly show that in a short period of time.
It's that, and you didn't mention it, but I have to believe there's some integration with the Ambulance Association as well.
I didn't hear that, Bruce. Say that again.
So you talk about the transports, the committals, that would involve the Ambulance Association, right?
They'll do the transport. with an
Right, so
officer.
we've got these different departments sort of all working together to make sure that somebody in crisis is being taken care of.
Correct.
I know that we'd be open to, looking at this in terms of all first responders being able to have access to this resource and having that a part of this. And what really is cool about all of this, so you mentioned this, this person responds to everybody in town. This is not just a youth and family thing or a youth thing. This is everyone, and likely has the best benefits for isolated adults, isolated seniors, families that are dealing with whether it's an issue with their kids or an issue, outside, in or out of their family. So it's something that breaks down all of the sort of the silos within our town.
I just, we had a lot of conversations about this before the pilot program was launched, and I think highly successful, and also a learning process. And this position will evolve, I think. And this is something that we'll be discussing during the budget. They're coming up with a proposal for the budget. I think it's one of these things that this is where town government has to adapt and change to serve the community. And this is something that's seen as a critical need for the community. And so as we go through the budget process, we can get through that conversation more about how this role would work with the different agencies. And I think it's going to still evolve as any new type of position and service evolves. So, but the good thing is we've had the opportunity to experiment a little bit with it and come up with a good model to start with. And so great work by both departments. And I think, this will be a continuing conversation. And I think it shows that we're forward thinking and we're ahead of the curve, and we're not doing this because somebody's telling us to doing it. We're doing it because we think there's a need in the community and we're trying to serve that need. So, so I appreciate all that hard work that's gone into it, and we will continue the conversation. Any other questions for Chief Drum or Scott? No? All right, good. Well, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
With that, we are at the end of the meeting. So I just want to open it up for any citizens' comments. Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question to the board or make a comment for public comment. No hands are raised that I could tell here. And Jacqueline turned the controls over to me, which is always a dangerous thing. And with that, then I guess a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Okay, and meeting is
Everybody.
adjourned. All in favor. Bye-bye. Thanks a lot, guys. Great conversations. Lots of good topics today. So have a good one. Thanks.